When I was 12, Padre Fiore disappeared. It was not uncommon in Sicily in those days for people to disappear. Their bodies were never found. They formed the foundations of new roads or railroad tracks or buildings, were hidden in disused wells or mine shafts. Some were chopped up and fed to dogs. Others were dissolved in baths of acid. Such disappearances were known as lupara bianca, or white deaths, a way for the mafia to dispose of people who had become inconvenient, dangerous, or embarrassing. Lupara bianca were particularly distressing for the relatives, largely because it was so difficult to determine whether the loved one had simply disappeared on his own or whether he had been forcibly disappeared. You couldn't be sure. A niggling doubt would never go away completely. For some days, Mamma resolutely refused to believe that Papa had disappeared. There had been some mistake, she said. He had no connection with the mafia. But after a week, she was forced to accept what everyone else had known all along, that he had gone and would not be coming back. I knew he was dead. He would never separate voluntarily from his mountain cap, which I found in the yard on the day of his disappearance. Despite the fact that there was no body, Mamma arranged a lavish burial and arrayed us all in black for the occasion. The twins, then aged 4, were decked out in a 3-legged suit of knickerbockers with matching tricorn hats and were cajoled into trotting alongside the coffin as a sort of mascot. They shed no tears. For appearance's sake, Mamma screamed with a grief she could not feel, and in an impressive display even managed to collapse at the graveside in a well-received show of anguish behind a thickly veiled hat. Luigi, Leonardo, Mario, Giuliano, Giuseppe, and Salvatore acted as pallbearers and still managed to crack jokes. I clutched the mountain cap in my fist and all alone grieved for my papa. Life went on, however, and within 3 months suitors were being received at the fattoria, for Mamma was a wealthy widow, and one who, according to local legend, was able to satisfy more than a man's pockets. Rehearsals were held during the long, hot summer of 1927. With all the elder boys out working the fields, Guerra and Pace and I were sent out of the way when the suitors came. The suitors were put through a trial run according to a strict timetable, morning, afternoon, and evening. When their time was up, they would emerge from the fattoria bathed in sweat, dabbing at their brows with handkerchiefs and adjusting their rumpled clothing. We would sit on the gate and watch them come and go, the judge, the counselor, the pharmacist, the candlemaker. All were given a fair shot. Then, one Wednesday morning during the school holidays, a new suitor came to call. He was a stranger to the region, and was much younger than any of his predecessors. He was even younger than Mamma. As usual, Mamma shooed me and the little ones out of the house before admitting the man inside. This time, however, something unusual happened. We soon began to hear noises coming from the house, the sound of ripping cloth first, and then furniture scraping across the floor or being thrown across the room. Strange banging noises filled the air, along with squeaking and thumping sounds. Then human sounds added to the din, groans, grunts, cries, and finally screams. Mamma had not made so much noise since the night of the twins' birth 4 years earlier. I was frightened, it is true, but I could not let the little ones see it. So we continued with our play and tried to block from our ears the clamor that was coming from the house. At one especially loud burst of cries, the twins ran across to the window and peered inside. They were nimble on their 3 little legs and could run quite fast. I just could not catch them in time. "No, boys, you must not look," I said, but it was too late to stop them. With their little noses smudging the glass, they could see a strange 4-legged creature writhing on the table in the front parlor. At first they thought it was a fellow creature, one like themselves, with the wrong number of legs, a strange torso, and no real place in the world. When the mist created by their breath on the glass diminished, they could see that part of the creature was their mamma, without clothes on, and the other part was the man who had crossed the yard and entered the house a little while ago. They were still trying to register all this when they were spotted by Mamma and waved away from the window with a kind of angry gesture that is used to shoo flies. Unlike the previous suitors, this one stayed a long time. The screams and crashes continued throughout the morning, afternoon, and into the evening. All day long we waited in the yard for the time when we would be readmitted into the house. The twins grew bored with play and occupied themselves with tracing patterns in the dust with their 3 little feet. Their etchings showed the writhing monster they had seen through the window. As the sun went down, I crept into la cucina to prepare supper for the older boys and the unmarried farmhands who sometimes ate at the fattoria. A scene of devastation met my eyes. Chairs were overturned, and several were even broken. A barrel of ale had been turned over and flooded the floor with suds. The shelves had collapsed, smashing every jar of preserves I had so lovingly prepared. Plates were broken. The dresser drawers had been pulled out, and their contents were spewed all over the room. The earthenware water jars lined up along the sink were smashed. The huge kettle was on its side, and the fire had gone out. I set about tidying things up, and soon had the fire lit and the food cooking before bathing the twins in the sink and singing them to sleep. That night, as I sat with my brothers, Luigi, Leonardo, Mario, Giuliano, Giuseppe, and Salvatore, and the farmhands at the long table having supper, Mamma and her new suitor appeared in la cucina without a hint of embarrassment. He looked as exhausted as it was possible to look. Mamma, by contrast, was radiant. She looked 17 again. "My children, this is Antonino Calabrese," she said. "From now on, he will be living here and will be your new father." Antonino Calabrese, it appeared, had passed the test. 4 months after the funeral, a wedding procession that started at the fattoria wound its way up through the steep streets of Castiglione to the Chiesa di San Antonio Abate. This time the twins were done out in a white sailor suit, but they skipped along less jauntily than on the previous occasion. Mamma became Signora Calabrese, and Signor Calabrese